All right, here we go. More speculation time around the free agency period. This time we're going to be talking about Ned Moyle from the Gold Coast Suns, 6'9", 22-year-old budding ruckman, who is essentially Jared Witt's understudy right now. Now, John Ralph yesterday suggested that there are reports that Collingwood, amongst a bunch of other clubs, are interested in the Victorian Ned Moyle. His contract does end at the end or the conclusion of the 2024 season. However, he's classified as a non-free agent. What that means for Collingwood is if they were wanting to acquire such a player like Ned Moyle, they would have to probably give up a draft pick. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So I'll just read out the free agency explained as, I guess, articulated by the Players Association. So if you are a player entering your 8th or 9th season and are in the top 25% of the club's earned salary, they are considered restricted free agents. Unrestricted free agency is a player who spent 8 years at one club, is outside of the top 25% of the club's earnings, or has spent 10 years under contract, and then players delisted at any stage of their career and at the end of their contract qualify as free agents. If they don't fit these criteria, then they must be traded for picks, or they can go through the draft, which in this situation, if Ned Moyle was to elect to reject any sort of, I guess, offer that Gold Coast managed to put together with another club, then he would go to the draft, and Collingwood probably wouldn't get Ned Moyle in the draft just because there would be teams who would be able to take him much earlier than we would be able to. Interestingly enough, Ned Moyle was poached by Gold Coast in the mid-season draft in 2021 at pick number 5, and guess where he was playing? In the Collingwood VFL side. So there's a previous established connection between the Pies and Ned Moyle, so that's an extra point to the case that maybe might work in Collingwood's favour if they really do decide to pursue this opportunity heavily in the postseason. In the VFL last year, Ned dominated all year long, and in the grand final, he steered the Gold Coast Suns to their premiership against Werribee Tigers. He collected a career high in the VFL, 73 hitouts in that grand final. So a massive effort in a massive game at such a young age. Like I said, he's 22 now, so he did that at age 21. In the VFL this year thus far, he's played 5 games, averaging 20 disposals a game, and has kicked 3 goals while also dominating the ruck contests. In the AFL this year, which is probably the most important reference when it comes to discussing this whole conversation, he's played 3 AFL games, 1 against the Dogs, which is obviously would be coming up against a Team English, Geelong, which was against the young Conway, so sort of just both young, budding, up-and-coming ruckmen, and then Essendon, who would have been against a Goldstein or even a Draper if he was available, but Draper's been playing mainly forward. And here are his averages, and you'd be surprised to hear some of them. 16 disposals per game, which is elite for a ruckman. 13 contested possessions, which is the best for any ruckman in the league right now, and 4.3 clearances, which is also elite. And yes, it's a small sample size, but these stats are incredible. His best game was against the Cats, against the Conway matchup, and he had 16 disposals, all of them contested. He actually had 17 contested possessions, so he mustn't have disposed of one of them, and had 6 clearances and 9 ground ball gets and 8 score involvements where they absolutely pumped Geelong. So that probably skews it a little bit. But this is a player with a small sample size in the AFL this year, but he's actually rated as the 3rd highest rated ruckman in the league at the moment, behind Pitt and Gawn. Yes, 3 games only, but it's still a case to be made. And when you compare his performances in AFL this year relative to his 2 games last year, there's been a significant increase in output in performance. He had 4 disposals and 5 disposals in the 2 games he played last year against St Kilda and Fremantle. He had 0 marks in that game, whereas this year he's averaging close to a contested mark in those 3 games. So some really promising stats for somebody who is a mid-season draft acquisition and is sort of out of favour at the moment at Gold Coast. So let's talk about that. So he's currently behind Jared Witt, who is one of the premier ruckmans in the league, and he's just signed a 2-year contract extension. So while Gold Coast are all of a sudden in this window where they might play their first finals in any AFL season that they've been a part of since their inception, they just can't play 2 genuine ruckmans in the same side. Jared Witts can't roll forward, and neither could probably Ned Moyle at this point of his career, being so young. So, and they've opted for their top 10 pick from last year's draft, Ethan Reid, and Dim has dubbed him as a bit of a unicorn. So Dim is really excited by the potential that Ethan Reid has, and probably is better suited to the situation, considering Ethan Reid is more of a ruck forward and could bide his time in the forward line while Jared Witts does his thing around the stoppage contest further up the ground. So that's something to consider for Ned Moyle. And despite these good games that Ned Moyle had in the AFL this year, he was dropped as soon as Jared Witts was once again made available. He was only forced to play because Jared Witts was injured. So how does Ned Moyle fit within the seams of the Collingwood Football Club right now? We look at Darcy Cameron, who is having an amazing year in the ruck, but I would argue he's more of a ruck forward. As I've already pointed to many times this year, Darcy Cameron is one of, if not the best marking ruckman in the league, and we have seen that he has forward craft, but he's never really had the opportunity to sort of reside there on a near full-time basis. So if we bring someone in like Ned Moyle into the ruck, then we can really reap the benefits of having a Darcy Cameron in a forward line where we're quite short-handed at right now. We don't have Dan McStay, we don't have Mychek, and look, sure, this is a short-term issue, but in the long term, Darcy Cameron's only 28, so he's still got some good years in him to potentially play as a really strong forward and to pinch hit in a ruck when Ned Moyle needs a spell. You look at Mason Cox, he's probably a year or so away from retirement, so next year would be a perfect time to introduce someone like Ned Moyle into the club. Yeah, you've got Aiden Begg and Oscar Steen, who are, I guess, building their craft at the VFL level, but Aiden Begg, as I've said to you before, he's only 6'4", and Oscar Steen is still relatively untried, and they're both out for the season, if my memory serves me correctly. So there is a genuine opportunity or a situation or a world where if Ned Moyle comes to the Collingwood Football Club in this postseason, he starts in round one ahead of everyone in that first centre bounce stoppage, and have Darcy Cameron forward and Mason Cox as, if he plays another year, he plays as that fringe VFL player, and then Aiden Begg and Oscar Steen can butt heads and fight for the third string opportunity. Just imagine Ned Moyle in a ruck contest giving even more first use to a player like Nick Dacos. Just imagine the numbers that would be jumping out of the paper for a Nick Dacos pairing with someone like Ned Moyle in the midfield. Now the $1 million question is, what would Collingwood be willing to give up to acquire such a player? I feel like it's a low-hanging fruit, and if you look at history in the past, Darcy Cameron was picked up by Sydney for a third-round pick, and I would make the case that Ned Moyle definitely has more interest and hype compared to where Darcy Cameron was at Sydney. I think Darcy Cameron had only played one game for Sydney. He was a couple years older at that time. I think he was 24, whereas Ned Moyle's just 22. Ned Moyle's playing in a strong VFL competition, whereas Darcy Cameron would have been playing in the, is it the NEFL? Is that what they would have called it back then in Sydney? I'm not too sure. So there's a few, I guess, factors that point to indicate that Ned Moyle is definitely more worthy at those given times of both players' careers, Darcy Cameron and Ned Moyle's, that he's more worthy of maybe a second round pick at this point, given the hype, as I said. So it's something, could Collingwood, or are they willing to give up a second round pick, or do they need to reserve that for someone like a Bailey Smith, or do they want to use it for someone like Mark Keane from Adelaide, who has interest in coming back to Collingwood, and he's that medium-sized intercepting defender who uses the ball very well. I don't think there's much of a salary cost that would come along with the acquisition of Ned Moyle, given he's still unproven and probably wants to come to if he wants to come to a destination club like Collingwood, you're probably going to have to accept something in the unders realm, and that might have to do with his salary. And like I said, that pre-established network and connection, having played 6 games for Collingwood in the 2021 VFL season, that has to count for something. And he's Victorian, residing in Gold Coast. We know these young players, after a few years, they get sick of living in the lonely Gold Coast and the underperforming Gold Coast. And then why wouldn't you want to come to a destination like Collingwood where you have prior experience and you're going to be under the tutelage of great coaches and players? So it's a great opportunity, and I think it's worth every shot trying to bring Ned Moyle into the Collingwood Football Club for a second round draft pick, given how young he still is. Let me know what your thoughts are, guys, in the comment section. See you guys. Bye.